unilateral and imperialist way rule the world. But today, it seems to me that there is something like a return. It seems to me that something like our notion of empire, using the term or not, has become the common sense. It's clear today, with the failures of the U.S. attempts in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also the economic inability of the U.S. to rule the world, its political failures to act unilaterally, to go it alone, as they used to say. That with those failures, it's clear today that U.S. unilateralism, U.S. imperialism is not an adequate concept. Something like empire, something like this concept of, like I was saying, a network power, a network of unequal powers. You could divide, like I said, on the monarchical, aristocratic, and more widespread levels. That something like that is emerging on the global level. For instance, at Copenhagen, at the climate summit last December, inside the meetings in the Bella Center, in the conference center where the UN meetings were happening, you could see a badly functioning empire. I mean, it was badly functioning because it was an attempt to negotiate among the dominant nation states with the subordinated nation states, the various capitalist corporations, a variety of NGOs. This is how the emerging system seemingly could work. But of course, at Copenhagen, it didn't work. They aren't able to arrive at a synthesis. I mean, at a decision, even. In any case, I think that this notion of empire for us was an attempt to name the new reality. Like I said, I wish I had a better term for it, but nonetheless, it seems to me actually almost generally accepted now that something like that is what's defining the forming global system, the emerging global system today. Okay, this book, all of that was sort of trying to explain what I mean when I say that, at least I understand our books as trying to work with or reinvent or renovate our political vocabulary. So sometimes in which the key terms seem to have been corrupted and need to be renewed or redefined, and other times in which, like with empire, that the old terms don't grasp a new reality, and we need sometimes to think new concepts. That's it. Okay. This new book, Commonwealth, is mostly oriented towards the future in this way, and the primary hypothesis, in a way which Carolyn also already mentioned, which is that the common will be the primary terrain of political struggle in the coming period. And by the common, we mean at least two things, or two domains. On the one hand, the common refers to the earth and its ecosystems, the air, the water, the forests, the atmosphere. This, in a way, corresponds much to the traditional English term from the 17th century of the commons with an S, which in 17th century England did precisely refer to the common fields or the common forests that were open and shared, common in that sense. The second domain or field of the common is the products of human creativity that we share. Like Carolyn mentioned, this would include ideas, images, code, languages, knowledges, also affects. That these of course can be made property. They can be made private property, but they are, in some sense, tend to be common. I guess I'll explain that in a minute. And so you can see there are two domains in a way that I've set out that function as a common. One is relating to the earth and its ecosystems, and the other with these products of human creativity, ideas, affects, knowledges, which in some sense are shared in the same way. Now, one way that I think is actually most accurate, but maybe most difficult to understand the common is that which is not property. Neither private property nor public property. And by public property here, I mean that which is regulated or controlled by the state. There's a tendency, in fact, to think only in terms, I think this is a contemporary weakness, that we have the tendency to think of the world and of our goods only in terms of private property or public property, and not to see that which is common, or that which could be common. For instance, it's true also in the economic crisis, the financial crisis of 2008. There's the assumption that the two economic alternatives we have are either the rule of private property, neoliberalism, privatization, or the rule of public property, meaning state control and state regulation. That in fact the evils of private property can only be answered by public property, and that the evils of public property, of state control, can only be answered by privatization and private property. In fact, I think our best examples of analyses and critiques of neoliberalism, I think of books that you probably know by Naomi Klein, for instance, by The History of Neoliberalism by David Harvey. Yeah, by Naomi Klein and David Harvey, excellent books. And I think the critiques of neoliberalism, though, in both of their cases, have the assumption, often implicit, that the alternative to neoliberalism is some form of socialist and or Keynesian state control of the economy. And so the challenge, in a way that Tony and I are trying to pose, is to think outside of that alternative between public and private, and precisely to think that which is common as neither public nor private. That this is open and shared, and therefore involves an institution of common governance, or a self-governance of the common. In fact, so the English title actually is it's not really wordplay, but it has at least a double meaning. The one is that referring to commonwealth, like the forms of wealth that we share in common, which, like I said, quickly are broken into those two types, the earth and the ecosystems on the one hand, and knowledges, etc. So that's our commonwealth. But you know, too, that the English term commonwealth, as one word, is a term that derives, too, from the 17th century in England. It's a term, too, that's been corrupted. I mean, commonwealth in English has come primarily to refer to the British colonial territories. The Commonwealth was Great Britain plus India plus Australia plus Canada, all of the colonial South Africa. And that was then called the Commonwealth. But originally, the 17th century meaning of it was the management or the institution for managing our commonwealth. I mean, hence the name of the term. So that it interests us for this because the object of our book, or the thinking in this book, is toward that notion of the institution for the governance of the common, trying to think what that would be. Now, that the first common that I mentioned is increasingly central in the coming politics, I think that is probably obvious to you. I mean, with questions about climate change, other environmental questions, I think it's clear that notion of the natural world we share in common, the earth and the atmospheres, that's becoming central seems quite obvious. That the second form of the common is becoming central in the coming politics depends on a rather long argument that Tony and I have worked through many times, and is again central in this book. It's really a claim that the capitalist economy, that the common is becoming central in the capitalist economy. And what we mean by that in part is that whereas for the last 150 years, industrial production was in some sense dominant in the capitalist economy. The sense I mean is that it's not that most people were always in the factories. Think of it when Marx is writing in 1860, in England, the most capitalist, most industrialized country, still a very small quantity of people were in the factories. But Marx thought that the industry was dominant within the capitalist economy in a qualitative sense, in the sense that the qualities of industry would be progressively imposed over the other